This is the third and final of our videos looking at the role of the supernatural in A Christmas Carol. In the previous two videos, we looked at the overview, we looked at the big ideas that you can bring into virtually any question that you're asked on the supernatural, or in fact, anything at all in the novella. And then we focused in on each of the four spirits and the impact that they have on Scrooge. Now it's time for you to put what you've learned into action. So you will see on the screen there is an example question paper. This is exactly the format a question will take. There'll be an extract from anywhere in the novella, and then you'll be asked a question which will first of all ask you to focus on the extract and then ask you to broaden out your discussion with whatever theme is identified, but talking about it in the rest of the novella as well, not just the information in the extract. And the expectation is that you would cover a similar number of points from the rest of the novel as are covered in the actual extract that you were given as well. So you need a pen and paper and some time. So what I would like you to do in a moment is to pause this video and read through the question. You can see it's from the visit of the Ghost of Christmas Present, which is in stave 3. So it's right bang in the middle of the novella. So you read the extract and you focus in on what you think the key question is. So the first thing I want you to do is to look at the question itself, decide on what you think the key words are in the question, and then identify from the extract the parts of it that you would use in an attempt to answer that question. So give yourself a good 5 minutes and see what you would come up with. So unsurprisingly, I've highlighted the phrase impact of the supernatural. So when you're talking about the impact of the supernatural in the novel, you're talking about obviously Scrooge's character. He is the hero of the novel. But Dickens also wants to teach us, the reader, something about how we should live our lives. So Scrooge is representative of a certain kind of person. So don't just talk about Scrooge in your answer, also talk about the bigger ideas that Dickens was trying to represent through the story of Scrooge. So you start with the ideas in the extract. You should have identified 3 different things from the extract. The question you should ask yourself is, what can you link them to in the rest of the novel? So if you haven't yet added those ideas to your notes, the linking ideas with the rest of the novel, or in fact any contextual ideas as well, pause the video again and see if you can add some more ideas to your notes. So you should have at least 3 things from the extract. What 3 things can you link them to in the rest of the novel, and where can you get your contextual ideas into your discussion too? So pause the video again, see what you can come up with. Okay, so I've identified and grouped evidence from the extract into 3 key areas here. So in the first big circle there, I've got lots of quotations that describe the Ghost of Christmas Present. There sat a jolly giant, glorious to see. Then we've got lots of description of what he looks like and what his personality is like. So phrases like clear and kind, genial face, sparkling eye, open hand, cheery voice, unconstrained demeanour, his joyful air. So lots there about the personality of the Ghost of Christmas Present. I've also separated off all on its own a really important quotation, and we've discussed this in a previous video, so hopefully you've identified this one too and you've got some ideas of what you would say about it. And it's glowing torch in a shape not unlike Plenty's horn. So what did we say about Plenty's horn? What did we say that you could discuss if you were using that piece of evidence? And then the final group I picked is about Scrooge himself. So we've got to shed its light on Scrooge. Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head before the spirit. Scrooge reverently did so. So all those quotations are about the impact on Scrooge. So what do you think the key big ideas are for each of those points. Now, if you think back to what we were talking about right at the beginning when we were gathering our ideas together, I did say there are three things that you can talk about regardless of what the question is and regardless of what the extract is. So let's see if you can remember what those things are. So pause your video and see what you can come up with for the quotations on the screen. I'm sure it won't be a surprise for you to see the three different points there in blue. They're the 3 points that we talked about right at the beginning of the first video on this theme. And these are the things that you come back to again and again and again, whatever the extract is. So all the things in the big bubble there, they all suggest things that are about spreading the Christian message. And if you don't think they're anything to do with the Christian message, look at all the positive words. We've got semantic field of words that suggest that this spirit represents all that's good about being a good Christian. So we've got genial, which means friendly. We've got a reference to sparkling, which I already talked about, light, clear and kind as well. Almost very transparent, nothing hidden about this spirit at all. He's jolly, he's happy, glorious to see. The word glorious makes you think of God. Open hands suggest honesty as well. Cheery voice, unconstrained demeanor makes you think of Christmas. The idea that you really enjoy yourself and you're absolutely full of the joys, which is what people associate with Christmas. And the word joyful as well also makes you think of God. The second example I picked because it alludes to the central message of Dickens' story, which is the idea of helping the poor. So we've got the reference to the Plenty's horn, and that is an allusion from Roman and Greek mythology, which represents abundance. And don't forget, at the time this novella was written, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people had swarmed to London, and there was so much poverty because of overpopulation. People were being paid very poor wages, so even people who were working didn't have much, and it meant lots of people ended up with no income at all and ended up in workhouses in awful conditions. And that was something that played on Dickens' mind a great deal, and he felt it was about greed, that the people at the top weren't sharing their wealth enough, and that it was important to give to charity and to look after people who had less. And that's what Plenty's horn represents, the idea that there was an abundance, that no one should go hungry. So there's lots you can bring in both those points that's contextual as well. So that's your assessment objective 3, and you need to get those ideas in when you discuss these language points. So when you talk about the spirit in the first point about spreading the Christian message, talk about most people being Christian, and obviously the novella itself represents Christianity. When you talk about Plenty's horn, talk about the message at the time and link it to the poverty that was caused by the Industrial Revolution and overpopulation and poor wages and people living on the streets. Similar to point 1 is the change in Scrooge. So one of the, Scrooge represents the greedy people that Dickens wanted to highlight in his own society, and he's presented as one example of that kind of person. But it's a positive example because ultimately Scrooge is brought to redemption. So we've got this detail here in the visit of the second spirit, where the light is being shed on Scrooge, which showing that he's being shown the Christian way. And already some of the language that is used to describe Scrooge's demeanour shows the effect, the impact that the visit of the spirits is having on Scrooge. So we've got the adverb timidly, and we've got the adverb reverently. Both of them suggest that change in Scrooge. So timid suggests shy, reverently suggests that he treats the spirit with respect. We've also got the idiom there, hung his head before the spirit, suggesting that he's ashamed of the way he lives. So again, that you can link contextual ideas in with that, because it links with Christian belief in redemption and the idea of being able to turn your life around and save yourself. So hopefully you came up with some of those ideas, but as I've said in previous videos, if you can remember those 3 key points and link whatever is in front of you to those points and linking the contextual ideas, you are, quite a far way to getting a really good response. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is to take you through one of those examples, which is the one about spreading the Christian message. So I've taken the first one in the bubble there with all the different descriptions of the Jolly Giant, just to show you how to build a really effective section of a response. What I would like you to do in your own time is to follow this example and then see if you can apply the same approach to the other two examples that were identified on the previous slide. So my point here is that I want to explain the central purpose about the impact of the supernatural is to get across Christ's message. So Dickens demonstrates to his largely Christian readership that kindness and compassion lie at the heart of Christ's message in the language he uses to describe the impactful and imposing presence of the ghost of Christmas present, a jolly giant glorious to see. Now, I've deliberately tried to write in a way where I'm hitting as many of the assessment objectives as I can as quickly as possible. You will notice I've highlighted in green any ideas to do with context. So I've pointed out that most people reading the novella were Christians, and I've also mentioned Christ's message. Both of those are contextual ideas, that's why they're in green. The evidence I presented, I've put in red. The blue is my point, so I've got quite a high level point there, that the impact of the Spirit is to spread the Christian message. So it's really important that you try and write in a style where you're saying as much as possible using as fewer words as possible. If you can master that, you can show the examiner that you can cover quite a lot of content in quite a quick response. So that's the first part of my response. Okay, so in my example, I've already focused on assessment objective 1. I've given my big ideas and I've quoted the evidence to support those ideas. I then need to explore the ideas further to pick up my assessment objective 2 marks. Now, you don't feel that you have to separate all the different assessment objectives off. You can actually analyze and have ideas as you go along. It doesn't have to be all in separate sentences. So you will notice that I do have some references to context already, and I do have some analysis later on. It's not all completely separate. In fact, it's much, much better if you can show that you can link all these assessment objective aspects together, because it gives a much more coherent style of writing. So I've gone on to look at some of the examples in the circle there of the way the Spirit is described to show that I understand the writer's methods. So first thing I've done is to pick up on the word giant, because the size of the Spirit I think is important, because this is Christmas present, so the Spirit should be big because that is the actual day. So the Spirit is a giant because it symbolizes and embodies how central and important the virtues the Spirit demonstrates are for a good Christian, most especially at Christmas time. So it's absolutely important that it is a giant, because it literally is gigantic, because those things are so important. Notice I've used the word symbolizes there, and I've highlighted in brown, as I have with other words, to show the words that I'm using that are technical vocabulary to do with writer's craft. The second part of my sentence is zooming in on the positive vocabulary that's used to describe the Spirit, and then I've contrasted it with an example from Stave 1 that shows that Scrooge is the opposite. So this is reinforced by the semantic field, again technical vocabulary, of positive emotive adjectives, and I've listed them: sparkling, jolly, genial, cheery and joyful, which emphasize qualities of personality which, as has already been demonstrated in the similes used to describe him in Stave 1, the emotionally cold, as hard and sharp as flint, Scrooge does not possess. So it's obvious from the way I've embedded that quotation and talked about him being emotionally cold, I understand how that simile works and what it shows about Scrooge. So this is an example of how you can really pack quite a lot into your writing if you can write in a style that's very concise and there's no extra bits, and you don't have big sentence openers to introduce your ideas that don't really pick you up any marks. Just get to the point. I call it a pithy style, where you're concise and don't waste your time with unnecessary waffle. The final thing I want to do is, even though I've touched on some contextual ideas with reference to the Christian readership in the first sentence, I felt there was a room to develop that a little bit further. So I've been quite explicit here in my final part of this example paragraph. So this is particularly important in Dickens' world. So I've specifically talked about the Industrial Revolution, where the Industrial Revolution has created an enormous wealth gap, and some of the very wealthy were doing nothing to help those in desperate need. And I think if you show that kind of specific knowledge, it will push your Assessment Objective 3 contextual mark up higher. I've also picked up on the reference to light to link it in with another example from somewhere else. And I've chosen Fezziwig because we've got the light mentioned from the Spirit, which also makes you think of the light that's mentioned with other people who are good Christians in the novella. So you can link that in. I think that's important, because my point is that the Spirit is used to spread the Christian message. So I think that does it pretty well. The adjective sparkling also echoes references to light, which I use symbolically to single out those excellent Christians like Fezziwig, who has a positive light which issues from his calves, and identifies them clearly with Jesus, who declares himself the light of the world in John's Gospel. So the level of contextual detail there would attract a very high mark for context. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of all the different elements and how you can combine them to produce quite a lengthy but very concise writing style. So what I'd like you to do now is just to have a look at that and just take note of the different elements. You can see in the color coding, you might want to use it as an example. So if you can, take a screenshot and annotate it to help you, and if you think that will help, by all means do that. But the color coding is quite straightforward. So anything in blue are the big ideas that answer the question. Any evidence is in red. The green sections are contextual ideas, and anything in brown is reference to writer's craft, technical vocabulary. Finally, it's over to you. We've already looked at the example there on the screen in front of you. What I would like you to do now is to look at the 2 remaining slides and see what ideas you can come up with for those. So I'm not going to be here to hold your hand through this though. It's a matter of looking at what you've come up with, show it your teacher. If you have had a go at these, I'm sure your teacher will be happy to have a look over and see if you're writing in the style that's going to get you a good mark in the exam. So these are the 2 remaining ones to look at. If you're unsure, you might want to have a go at one of them and get some feedback. But everything on the page is there for you. You just need to add the bones to it and see if you can produce the same style as the example. So the bits in blue are your big ideas. So the first big idea is to reinforce the message that no one should go hungry. Then we've got our example there in the circle, and the bits in red are the writer's methods that are used in that example. How can you combine all those ideas to make your point effectively? What contextual ideas can you link in? Now that one is about the fact that there should be enough food for everyone. So I'm sure we've said enough already to help you to bring in some strong contextual ideas into that particular paragraph. And then the final example there is to change Scrooge and bring him to redemption. So that's the big idea. Redemption is actually saving his soul and making sure that he doesn't go to hell. And then we've got the references there to light, and we've got a couple of examples that show the emotional impact on Scrooge. And in red, we've got the techniques that he used. So we've got the adverbs that show how Scrooge has changed, and the symbolism to do with light. So please do have a go at these examples. Get your teacher to have a look at your work, and good luck with your preparations for the exam.